They took my daughter. Please help me. Kara's voice cracked as she spoke with tears in her eyes. Rain blurring the neon lights of a Seoul alley. Minho stands over Kiara, his shadow long and imposing. In the underworld, tears are considered a liability. But when Minho saw the woman in the red dress, he didn't see weakness. He saw a mirror of his own forgotten past. Kiara wasn't crying because she was hurt. She was crying because the law had been rewritten to steal her heartbeat. Her daughter, Zora. Most men in Minho's position would offer money or a hollow promise. But Minho is not like most men. He is a man who breaks systems, not just bones. When Kiara looked up and whispered, "They took my daughter," she expected pity. Instead, she got a cold, calculating gaze. "The law took her," Minho replied, "so we will use the law to burn them down." This isn't a story of a rescue. It's a story of a total systemic takeover. They didn't just want Zora back, they wanted to ensure no one could ever reach for her again. But to do it, Kiara would have to enter a world of shadows, and Minho would have to find a heart he thought he'd buried years ago. Hello family, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, so I can send you special regards, and also, hit the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Now let's dive deep into the story. The humidity in the district was thick enough to swallow the neon signs of the nearby pharmacies and late-night noodle shops. Kiara sat on a weathered wooden bench, her vibrant red dress a jarring splash of color against the gray concrete. Her hands were pressed against her face, her shoulders shaking with the kind of silent, rhythmic sobbing that only comes when a person has run out of air to scream. 2 sets of polished leather shoes stopped 3 feet in front of her. "Crying in this neighborhood attracts the wrong kind of attention," a voice said. It wasn't unkind, but it was as sharp as a glass shard. Kiara looked up. Standing before her was a man who looked like he owned the very air he breathed. His head was shaved clean, revealing the intricate, dark tattoos that crawled up his neck like ivy. His white shirt was pristine, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms mapped with ink and muscle. Behind him stood 2 shadows, one a tall black man in a tailored suit and sunglasses, the other an Asian man with the watchful eyes of a hawk. "Go away," Kiara whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't have anything for you." The man, Minho, didn't move. He gestured to the empty space on the bench. "I am not looking for anything, but you are sitting in front of my place of business. Your grief is disruptive." He sat down, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to force her to acknowledge him. He didn't look at her. He looked at the rain beginning to mist under the streetlights. "They took her," Kiara said, the words spilling out because she had no one else to tell. "They took my Zora." Minho's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed a slow, deliberate beat on his knee. "Who?" "The police. A rival." "The Hanjiao Conservatory." She spat the name like it was poison. "They said I signed a sponsorship. They said because my visa was tied to my employment, and my employment was terminated, Zora is now a ward of the corporate state. They took my 7-year-old daughter and put her behind a gate because I owe them a debt I never even saw." Minho finally turned his head. His eyes were dark, calculating. He knew the Hanjiao Conservatory. It wasn't a school, it was a high-end human capital firm. They preyed on talented expats and immigrants, using complex fine print to essentially own their lives. "You are Kiara," Minho stated. It wasn't a question. He had likely had his man in the sunglasses, Dax, look her up the moment he saw her. "You were an architectural consultant. You found a flaw in their building codes. That is why they fired you. That is why they took the girl." Kiara's eyes widened. "How do you?" "I deal in information, Kiara, and I deal in corrections." Minho stood up. "The law in this city is a weapon. Right now, it is pointed at you. You can sit here and wait for the police to deport you tomorrow morning, or you can stand up." "Why would you help me?" she asked, wiping her eyes, her voice gaining a sliver of iron. "Men like you don't do things for free." Minho looked at his bodyguard, then back at Kiara. "I hate untidy systems. The conservatory is a messy predator. They are overreaching. I don't want your money, Kiara. I want the blueprints you found. I want to see the look on Director Sang-woo's face when we dismantle his empire using the very paper he used to steal your daughter." He held out a hand. It was a hand covered in tattoos of dragons and thorns, the hand of a man who had seen the worst of the world. Kiara looked at his hand, then at the dark street. She thought of Zora's laugh, and the way the girl's afro puffs felt like clouds under her fingers. She stood up, ignored his hand, and straightened her red dress. I don't want him dead, Kiara said firmly. I want him ruined. I want him to watch as everything he owns becomes mine and Zora's. A ghost of a smile touched Minho's lips. Good, I prefer a surgical strike to a blunt one. Follow me. As they walked toward the black sedan idling at the curb, the bodyguard, Dax, opened the door. For the first time in 48 hours, Kiara felt a glimmer of something other than despair. She felt the cold, hard spark of war. Minho's office was not a smoky basement or a gilded penthouse. It was a sterile, high-tech floor of an unremarkable glass building in the Gangnam district. The walls were lined with monitors displaying logistics, shipping lanes, and legal filings. Dax, get her some tea, and a laptop with an encrypted uplink, Minho commanded as he shed his white shirt for a fresh one. Kiara sat at a glass table, feeling out of place in her torn dress. You said you're a corrector. What does that actually mean? Minho sat across from her, leaning back. People think the Mafia is about selling drugs or protection. That is the old way. The new way is systemic arbitrage. I find people who are cheating the system, and I cheat them better. The conservatory stole your daughter using a conservatorship clause. It's a legal loophole usually reserved for the elderly who can't care for themselves. They applied it to your daughter by claiming you were financially unstable the moment they fired you. But I have savings, Kiara protested. They froze them, the other associate, Quan, said, walking over with a tablet. They filed a lien against your bank account 30 minutes after your termination. It's a synchronized strike. Kiara felt a chill. This wasn't just a bad boss, this was a machine. To get Zora back, Minho said, his voice dropping an octave, we cannot just break in and take her. They would label you a kidnapper, and you'd spend the rest of your life in a Korean prison. Zora would be lost forever. No, we have to make the conservatory beg you to take her back. How? We find the ghost debt, Minho explained. Director Sangwoo is using the conservatory to wash money for offshore investors. The students are just cover for the movement of funds. If we can prove the debt they say you owe doesn't exist, the entire legal structure of Zora's detention collapses. But I need the architectural flaws you found. Why were they so afraid of your report? Kiara took a deep breath. Because the school isn't a school, the basement levels, the wiring and the reinforced steel. It's designed to be a high-security server farm. They aren't educating children, they are housing data for the underworld. Zora is being held in a building that is technically an illegal data center. Minho swapped a look with Dax. This was better than he thought. If that's true, they aren't just violating labor laws, they are violating national security protocols. I have the files, Kiara said, but they are on a physical drive in my apartment. The police are probably watching it. Minho stood up and grabbed a leather jacket. The police work for the city works for the highest bidder. Tonight, we are the highest bidder. You're going to get them, Kiara asked. No, Minho said, looking at her. You are. You're going to walk in the front door. I'm going to make sure the cameras blink at exactly the right time. Dax and Quan will be your shadows. It's time to see if you have the stomach for this, Kiara. Kiara stood up, her grief now fully replaced by a cold, burning purpose. I'll get the drive. Just make sure you keep your promise about Sangwoo. In my world, Minho said, a promise is the only thing that doesn't have a price. The infiltration of Kiara's own apartment felt like a fever dream. Under the cover of a sudden soul downpour, Dax guided her through the service entrance. 3 minutes, Dax whispered into his comms. Minho, the grid is dark, go. Kiara moved through the hallways she once walked with Zora. Every corner reminded her of her daughter, the sticker on the doorframe, the faint scent of cocoa butter in the air. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but Minho's voice echoed in her earpiece. Don't be a victim, be a ghost. She reached the loose floorboard under her bed and pulled out the small, silver drive. As she turned to leave, a flashlight beam cut through the living room. Security, who's there? A voice shouted. Kiara froze. It was one of the conservatory's private guards, not the police. They were already stripping the place. Dax, she hissed. Don't move, Minho's voice came through the earbud. Stay silent, he can't see you in the corner. The guard stepped into the bedroom, the light sweeping inches from Kiara's face. She held her breath until her lungs burned. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. The guard spun around and ran toward the noise. "Now," Minho commanded. Kiara bolted. She didn't look back until she was shoved into the back of the sedan 3 blocks away. She was gasping for air, the silver drive clutched in her white-knuckled fist. Back at the office, Minho took the drive and plugged it in. Maps, schematics, and thousands of lines of code filled the screens. He spent an hour in silence, his eyes darting across the data. "You were right," Minho said, his voice carrying a new level of respect. "This isn't just a server farm, it's a bridge. Sangwoo is using the children's tuition accounts to funnel money into a digital currency that doesn't leave a trail. Zora is the collateral for your silence." He turned to her. "Tomorrow, we make our first move. We aren't going to the police. We are going to Sangwoo's bank. We're going to tell them that his collateral, your daughter, has just become a liability that will bankrupt them." Kiara looked at the screen, then at Minho. "What if he hurts her because we're attacking his money?" Minho walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time he had touched her. His hand was heavy and steadying. "He won't, because I just sent a message to his personal phone. If a single hair on Zora's head is touched, I will release the encryption keys to his private accounts. He is currently watching his net worth fluctuate because I'm holding the leash." "You're using her as a pawn?" Kiara asked, her voice trembling. "No," Minho said firmly. "I'm using him as a pawn. Zora is the queen. We are just the board she's playing on. Now sleep. Tomorrow we start the execution." Kiara lay down on the sofa in the office, the silver drive under her pillow. For the first time since Zora was taken, she didn't cry. She watched Minho as he worked through the night, a silent guardian who seemed to be fighting a war he had been preparing for his whole life. The atmosphere in Minho's office was electric as the sun rose over the Seoul skyline. The strategy had shifted. It was no longer about hiding, it was about positioning. However, every operation of this scale has a pressure point, the moment where the enemy tries to find a crack in the armor. "We have a problem," Quan said, his eyes glued to a scrolling monitor. "Someone is pinging our internal server from an unauthorized IP. It's not a hack, it's a localized signal. There's a tracker in this room." Minho's eyes immediately swept the room, landing on Kiara. The suspicion in the room was a physical weight. Kiara felt her stomach drop. I haven't left your sight," she stammered. Minho approached her, his expression unreadable. He didn't reach for a weapon, he reached for the red dress she had been wearing since the bench. "The hem," he muttered. He took a small pocket knife and sliced into the fabric of her sleeve. A tiny, silver disc fell onto the glass table. "A proximity beacon," Dax growled. "They must have tagged her during the scuffle at the apartment." The realization hit Kiara like a wave. She had unknowingly led the enemy right to Minho's sanctuary. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Minho picked up the tracker. Instead of destroying it, he smiled, a cold, dangerous expression. "Don't be sorry, Kiara. You just gave us a gift. They think they've found us. Now we tell them exactly what we want them to see." For the next 4 hours, Minho didn't treat Kiara like a liability. He treated her like a partner. He explained how they would use the tracker to feed Director Sangwoo false data, making him believe they were fleeing to the docks of Incheon. Meanwhile, the real work began. Kiara was tasked with identifying the secondary signatories, the other parents who had lost children to the conservatory. "If we go in alone, we are just a criminal and a grieving mother," Kiara noted, her architectural mind clicking into place. "But if we show the bank that 50 high-net-worth families are about to file a class-action fraud suit, the bank will pull Sangwoo's credit line instantly." Minho watched her, impressed. Most people in her position would be paralyzed by fear. Instead, she was building a cage for the man who took her daughter. "You have a sharp mind, Kiara. It's a shame you wasted it on buildings. You would have made a fine strategist in my world." "I'm building a future for my daughter," she replied. "That's the most important structure there is." The plan required a ghost. In the digital world, a ghost is an account that exists but cannot be traced to a physical person. Minho and Kiara spent the night at a private terminal, tracing the educational bonds the conservatory had issued. "Look at this," Kiara whispered, pointing to a series of transactions. "Every time a child is detained for a debt, A corresponding bond is sold to an offshore company called Aegis Holdings. And who owns Aegis? Minho asked. It's a shell, Quan interrupted, but the digital signature matches Director Sangwoo's personal encryption. They had found the smoking gun. Sangwoo wasn't just holding children, he was betting against their parents' ability to pay, then selling the debt to himself to hide his own embezzled wealth. It was a perfect, closed loop of corruption. However, the deeper they went, the more they realized the stakes. Sangwoo wasn't just a corrupt educator, he was a key figure in a political coalition. If they moved too early, the system would simply protect its own. We need a moment where he is public, Minho decided. A moment where the cameras are rolling and the VIPs are present. He's hosting the Foundation Gala in 2 days. That's where we strike. But I'm a fugitive, Kiara reminded him. And you're a man with tattoos on his neck. We won't exactly blend in at a black tie gala for the elite. Minho looked at her, his eyes softening just a fraction. Kiara, in this city, money and power are the only clothes that matter. By tomorrow night, you won't be a fugitive. You will be the majority shareholder of the debt he thinks he owns. As they worked, a quiet moment passed between them. Minho revealed why he was helping. Years ago, his own sister had been processed through a similar system. He hadn't been strong enough or smart enough to stop it then. This wasn't just a job for him, it was a late-arriving justice. I won't let Zora become a ghost, Minho promised. I've spent my life in the shadows so I could learn how to burn them down. The night before the gala, the tension reached its breaking point. Minho moved their operation to a mobile command center, a high-end luxury bus, to stay ahead of the tracker signal they were still spoofing. The plan was set, but the emotional toll was visible on Kiara. She sat by the window, looking at a photo of Zora on her phone. What if he moves her? What if he knows we're coming? He's arrogant, Minho said, sitting beside her. Arrogance is a blindfold. He thinks he's playing against a desperate mother. He doesn't realize he's playing against a mother who has nothing left to lose and a man who has everything to gain. Suddenly, the monitors flared red. Signal intercepted, Quan shouted. It's a video feed. They're broadcasting from the conservatory. The screen flickered to life. It was a sterile, white room. Zora was there, sitting at a desk, looking stoic but tired. Behind her stood Director Sangwoo. He didn't speak to the camera. He simply looked at his watch, then patted Zora on the shoulder. It was a message. The clock is ticking. Kiara lunged for the screen, her hand pressing against the glass. Zora. Minho caught her before she could collapse. He held her firmly, his voice a low, steadying hum in her ear. Look at her eyes, Kiara. Look. Kiara forced herself to look. Zora wasn't crying. She was tapping her fingers on the desk in a specific rhythm. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short. SOS, Kiara whispered. She's signaling me. No, Minho said, a look of grim pride crossing his face. That's not SOS. That's the rhythm of the security code for the basement levels you told her about. She's not asking for help. She's giving us the final piece of the puzzle. She's your daughter, Kiara. She's fighting, too. The room went silent. The weight of the mission changed from a rescue to a coordinated liberation. Minho turned to Dax and Quan. Double the stake. I want every asset we have moved into the conservatory's short sell positions. When we walk into that gala tomorrow, I don't just want Sangwoo arrested. I want him to realize he is the only person in the room who owns nothing. He turned back to Kiara. Get some rest. Tomorrow we don't just get your daughter, we get your life back. The chapter ends with Kiara looking at the frozen frame of Zora on the screen. The girl wasn't a victim. She was a beacon. And beside her stood Minho, no longer a stranger from a bench, but the architect of a new kind of justice. The Grand Soul Atrium was a palace of glass and gold, filled with the city's most influential figures. Director Sangwoo moved through the crowd like a king, basking in the praise for his philanthropic work with the conservatory. He felt untouchable. Then the doors opened. Minho entered first. He was no longer the man in the rolled-up sleeves. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. His tattoos were hidden beneath silk, but his aura of lethal authority remained. At his side was Kiara. She was a vision in an emerald green gown, her hair styled with regal precision, her head held high. The room went quiet. Sang-woo's smile faltered. He signaled his security, but before they could move, Dax and Quan, dressed as high-level event staff, stepped into the light, holding tablets that were already broadcasting to every guest's phone. "Director Sang-woo," Min-ho's voice projected through the hall, calm and terrifying. "I believe you're celebrating a success that doesn't belong to you." Sang-woo recovered quickly, sneering. "This is a private event. Guards, remove these intruders." "Wait," Kiara said, stepping forward. Her voice didn't tremble. "Before I leave, I think the investors would like to see the alternative asset report." At that moment, the massive digital displays behind the podium, meant to show the conservatory's success stories, flickered. Instead of smiling children, they showed the architectural blueprints Kiara had retrieved. Red lines highlighted the illegal server farms hidden in the basement, and scrolling text revealed the ledger of laundered money. "That's a lie, a fabrication," Sang-woo shouted. "Is it?" Min-ho asked, stepping into Sang-woo's personal space. "Because the National Tax Service just received the decryption keys, and your bank, they just processed a margin call. Since your collateral, the children, are held under illegal contracts. Their value is 0. You aren't a director anymore, Sang-woo. You're a debtor." The room erupted into whispers. Sang-woo reached for his phone, but his hands were shaking. He realized the trap wasn't a physical one. He had been erased financially and socially in less than 60 seconds. While the chaos unfolded at the gala, the real victory was happening miles away. Using the security codes, Zora had signaled through the video feed. A tactical team, vetted and paid for by Min-ho, Corrections Fund, breached the conservatory's holding wing. Kiara and Min-ho arrived at the conservatory just as the gates were being forced open. The police, finally forced to act by the public evidence released at the gala, were already swarming the building. Kiara didn't wait for the all clear. She ran past the yellow tape, her emerald dress trailing behind her like a battle flag. She reached the basement level, the heart of the machine. "Zora," she screamed. A heavy steel door at the end of the hall clicked open. A small figure in a simple white uniform stepped out. Zora looked at the chaos, her eyes wide, until they landed on her mother. "Mommy." The reunion wasn't a movie-style slow-motion run. It was a desperate, breathless collision. Kiara collapsed to her knees, pulling Zora into her arms, sobbing not with grief, but with the sheer force of relief. Min-ho stood at the entrance of the hallway, watching from the shadows. He didn't join the embrace. He stayed back, playing the role he knew best, the guardian. He looked at his watch. Sang-woo had been taken into custody. The servers were being seized. The system was being purged. Dax stepped up beside him. "The paperwork is finalized, boss. The debt has been legally transferred to a trust in Kiara's name. She owns the building now, and the land." Min-ho nodded, his eyes never leaving the mother and daughter. "Good. Make sure the deportation order is not just canceled, but deleted from the federal database. I want them to have a golden visa by morning." Zora looked up from her mother's shoulder and saw Min-ho. She didn't know him, but she saw the way he looked at her mother, with a respect that bordered on something deeper. She gave him a small, shy wave. Min-ho, the man who never smiled, gave a single, sharp nod of acknowledgement. The debt was paid. 6 months later, the Hanjiao Conservatory had been renamed. It was now the Zora Global Institute, a legitimate center for architectural and technological education for immigrant families. Kiara stood on the balcony of the top floor, looking out over the city that had once tried to swallow her whole. The red dress was framed in her office, a reminder of the night she refused to be a victim. A door opened behind her. Min-ho walked in, carrying 2 cups of tea. He looked different. The suits were still expensive, but the hardness in his eyes had softened into a quiet, watchful peace. He had stepped away from the Mafia side of his business, focusing instead on systemic justice, using his resources to protect those the law ignored. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes, Min-ho said, handing her a cup. "I'm ready," Kiara replied. She looked at him, her expression soft. "Zora is asking if you're coming to her recital tonight. She says you promised to show her that trick with the security codes." Min-ho leaned against the railing beside her. "I'll be there. I don't break promises to the CEO's daughter." They stood in silence for a moment, the sun setting over Seoul. Their relationship hadn't been a whirlwind romance of flowers and empty words. It was a bond forged in the fires of a shared war. It was a partnership of equals, a man who knew how to break the world and a woman who knew how to rebuild it. "We did it, Minho," she whispered. "She's safe, we're safe." "No," Minho corrected her, taking her hand in his tattooed fingers interlacing with hers. "We didn't just make her safe, we made her the future." The story ends with a wide shot of the building, the very structure that was once a prison, now a beacon of light. As the lights of the city flicker on, Kiara and Minho walk back inside together, not as a boss and a victim, but as a family that the world would never dare to challenge again. The end.